From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee said on Friday that Fani Willis could remain on her case to prosecute President Trump in Georgia, but only if her former boyfriend and fellow prosecutor Nathan Wade exits. Plus, later, we'll talk to our colleague Elliot Kaufman about the latest in the war in Israel and the reaction in Israel to Chuck Schumer's speech calling for Netanyahu, the prime minister, to go. Welcome to Potomac Watch. I'm Kate Batchelder-Odell, and I'm joined today by my talented colleague, editorial board member, Mine Ukwe-Barua. Friday, we got a 25-page ruling from Judge Scott McAfee that dealt with the issue of whether Fani Willis was compromised in her case on prosecuting President Trump. The question has been over her involvement with another prosecutor on the case, Nathan Wade, and there were hearings about this question about the nature of their relationship and when it began, since some of the defendants in the case alleged a financial impropriety because Fani had gone on trips with Mr. Wade and that he had paid for, and that fatally compromised the case. The judge didn't agree with that in Friday's ruling. He said that it was basically too extraordinary a remedy to throw Fani Willis off the case, but that her former boyfriend, Nathan Wade, did need to leave the case to avoid the appearance of impropriety. And Judge McAfee lambasted Fani Willis's judgment and also her performance on the stand. Mine, reading this, not a wholesale victory for Trump, not what Trump wanted, but how do you read whether the case really can continue or how it will go forward now that we've had this really bruising mark on Fani Willis's judgment played out so publicly?
Well, I think you're exactly right to separate the substance of the ruling, which did uphold the claims that the defense made about Fani Willis and her relationship with Nathan Wade, and it called for Nathan Wade's removal from the case, from how it's going to be received publicly. Because I think in the first case, you can reasonably say that the judge, Scott McAfee, came to the right decision in saying that Fani Willis violated her duties as a prosecutor by essentially creating the appearance of impropriety by going on these trips with Nathan Wade. He was obviously being paid out of her office, and she was benefiting from that in some way, even if he was splitting the costs with her, which she alleges and is able to show to a certain extent. It is just not acceptable ever for a public official to be directly involved with someone who's on their payroll in a romantic way. And it made sense that she was basically criticized by the judge in charge of hearing the case for that kind of conduct and forced to remove Nathan Wade from the case. But at the same time, it's clear that she didn't necessarily violate any clear statute in doing so. And he pointed to several other instances where there had been conflicts of interest or near conflicts in which prosecutors were still able to continue moving ahead on a case and were not removed. He decided to condemn her in the ruling, make sure that Nathan Wade can no longer be directly involved, but stopped short of saying that the case should be thrown out, which is what Trump's defense team suggested, or that Fani Willis herself has to be removed from it. But there's a broader question of the appearance of public disorder surrounding the case, which has continued to grow. Because Fani Willis also had certain charges in the indictment against Trump removed by the same judge just a couple of days before, it just seems like a very poorly run show. And the public, which is going to be watching the case, and certain members will be appointed to the jury before it moves into trial, is clearly seeing that she did not really have her act together in terms of how they decided to go about it. And she's not really seen as a professional who has the ability to prosecute the case successfully against the former president. And so the court of public opinion, I think, already saw this as a politicized move to bring Trump under charges for his conduct in the aftermath of the election in Georgia. And that appearance is only increasing, particularly among people who are already skeptical. So it's going to contribute to the sense of disorder around the case. There still isn't a trial date set, and it seems like it's not going to really have the impact that Trump's critics hoped it would have in terms of convicting him, not only under the letter of the law, but in the eyes of the public.
I certainly agree it'll leave some lasting damage in the court of public opinion. And there were elements of the testimony that were quite difficult to piece together or understand. I mean, for instance, Fani Willis described some of these trips that she went on with Nathan Wade and said that she paid him back in cash that she keeps at her home. This is certainly possible, but a little odd for how most people operate their finances these days. And all sorts of elements like this that were just quite odd and I think did draw more public scrutiny on the case. There's one other element I think about her judgment implicated in this case I think we should talk about. And for that, why don't we listen to a short clip of something that Fani Willis had to say about the case in public that the judge would comment on. Let's take a listen and we'll talk about the substance in a minute.
I appointed 3 special counsel, as is my right to do. Paid them all the same hourly rate. They only attacked one. I hired one white woman, a good personal friend and great lawyer. A superstar, I tell you. I hired one white man, brilliant, my friend, and a great lawyer. And I hired one black man, another superstar, a great friend, and a great lawyer. Oh Lord, they gonna be mad when I call them out on this nonsense. First thing they say, oh, she gonna play the race card now. But no, God, isn't it them who's playing the race card when they only question one?
Well, the judge was quite harsh on Fani Willis's decision to make these public remarks about the case and even raise the possibility of a gag order coming that would bar the prosecutor from discussing this case in public. One other thing I'd add, Monet, too, is that we don't know if Trump will appeal, but this could potentially drag out the legal process for quite some time. And she may have even given Trump some basis on which to eventually appeal a conviction, even if that were to come before the election, which looks unlikely at this point. So just on a practical matter, do you think we will see a gag order in this case, or how else might it complicate the path forward here?
I would be surprised if Judge McAfee decided to gag Fani Willis, despite the fact that she clearly was acting inappropriately by saying that her critics were playing the race card in public, or by speaking about the case in public at all. I do think that his hope will be that the ruling, which did find her responsible for violation of ethics and also ordered her to dismiss Nathan Wade from the case, will be sufficient to restrain her conduct in the future, that she probably already realizes that she's on thin ice and is not going to be making public appearances and statements of that kind. And so, of course, judges are reluctant to issue gags unless they think that they're completely necessary. In this case, he'll probably want to be restrained and think she will stay within the lines of ethical conduct without my having to order an official gag. But in terms of the timing of the case, you're definitely right. There was already doubt about whether there was a possibility of the trial beginning by the end of the year because of Trump's other legal problems. Obviously, he's facing charges in 4 other jurisdictions, and there is a jostling among these different prosecutors and judges about exactly when each case can begin. And it seemed as if Georgia was already going to defer to some of these earlier cases. The first one to begin will be in New York toward the end of March, although that now is facing a possible delay. And then the D.C. case, once the Supreme Court has weighed in, probably will follow after that. But now that we've had these disruptions with deciding whether Fani Willis is able to stay on the case at all, it's much likelier that there's going to be a subsequent delay in the beginning of the Georgia case. And so it now is very, very unlikely that it will begin before the election, if in 2024 at all. And also, as you mentioned, it is very possible that Trump's team is going to continue to cite the evidence of her ethical breaches in a possible appeal. And so the strength of the case and the timeline seem to have been deeply damaged by her misconduct. And it's just incredible to think that she wouldn't have considered these possibilities when she was making those horrible decisions of getting involved with Nathan Wade in the first place.
And just briefly, Monet, of turning to the politics a little bit of this, we now have this case, which for all the reasons we've discussed, has serious credibility problems in the court of public opinion. Alvin Bragg's case has been criticized roundly. It's a campaign finance bank shot that I don't think most voters can even really grasp what he's trying to prove, let alone think it's substantive. And then you have the classified documents case, which have potentially a little bit more substance to them. But I guess my question is, are these indictments completely baked into the public's decision-making already anyway, because Republicans have concluded that there's not a lot of credibility to them? Or do you think that the possibility of a potential conviction really could move the needle for some voters in the coming months?
I think it's largely the first. Just about anyone who's paying attention to politics has a firm opinion on one side or the other, either that Trump is being completely railroaded by the Justice Department under the Biden administration and other progressive prosecutors, and that they're cooking up show trials just for the sake of hanging him high and removing him from contention, or the opposite, and that Trump is a gross criminal, always has been long before he was elected to the presidency, and that these prosecutors are doing exactly the right thing by finding whatever charges they're able to stick to him and doing a service to the American public by removing him from contention. I think just about every American voter can be sorted at least loosely into one bucket or the other, and there are a few who are still waiting to make up their minds. I do think that there probably is the possibility that Trump will do or say something during the course of these trials as they move forward that could make people start paying even more attention, that could discredit him in some of the eyes of his more reluctant supporters. Americans don't like the idea of electing a president who is a convicted felon. Even a lot of Trump supporters would feel very uncomfortable doing that. But I still think at the end of the day, you have to say that these trials are going to have very, very little sway on even swing voters, and that we're in for a lot of chaos, a lot of commentary, all of which amounts to very little change in the outcome of the presidential election.